Now we're going to work on the wedge toe. Again, I'm going to show you this technique on double pointed needles and on circular needles. So depending on what your preference is, you'll know how to start the sock using the type of needles that you prefer. When I do this on double pointed needles, I start with a figure 8 cast on, and I'll show you exactly how I do that. But before I do, I just want to mention that if you know Judy's Magic cast on or a Turkish cast on or any other type of cast on that creates stitches on 2 needles that ends up looking like what we have when we're done with this figure 8 cast on, you can easily substitute that instead of learning a new one. So that's completely up to you. The figure 8 cast on is the one that I learned first, and I find it really comfortable and easy to do. Relatively easy because all of these are a little bit fussy when you're trying to cast onto 2 needles at once. But it's one that I'm familiar with, so that's the one I'm going to teach you right now. You can see I have the tail of the yarn on my left and the working yarn on the right, and I'm starting with the yarn between the 2 needles with the tail coming out to the front over the bottom needle. So can you see how that is set up here? Now I'm going to just hold on to that so it stays tight, and I'm going to start by wrapping the yarn around the needles in a figure 8. So I go around the top needle and then through the middle of the front once, and then I go up and around the bottom needle and through the middle on the bottom once, and I've got 1 on each needle. I'm going to do that until I have 8 on each needle. And if you are working a sock, we'll talk about how many stitches you need to start with. I'm just starting with 8 on each needle, or 16 stitches, for demonstrating to you how to make the sock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now the working yarn's in the back on this top needle, and that's good because I'm going to knit across this top needle, and I want to leave the loops on the bottom needle in the middle of the needle so they don't fall off while I go across the top needle, and that's what I'm going to knit first, across the top needle, and use my nice pointy needles and get knitting across this first row. The first stitch is always the worst because it's really tight and the needles are close together and you don't want to drop anything. But just be patient and go slowly. You have the whole rest of the sock to rush on if you have to be a fast knitter, but you don't want to rush on this or it just won't work. You'll end up dropping something and it'll be more frustrating to rush and mess it up than it is to take your time and go slowly. When I get to that last loop, you can see it's starting to loosen up, so I'm just going to tug on that tail, kind of tighten that last loop up, knit that stitch, and hold that tail in place. So I've gone across all 8 stitches on the top of the needle. See how that tail kind of wants to get away? So when I turn around and I'm ready to knit across the second needle, I'm going to twist the tail with the working yarn so that it gets locked into place. And then after I knit across the top needle, that tail is going to be firmly locked in place and it's not going to fall apart. So again, I'm going to move the stitches so that they're in the middle of the bottom needle. Can you see how? So when I come to knit across the top, it's a little difficult to see, but I'm going to knit into the back loop of the stitches because of the way they're oriented on the needle. If I knit it to the front loop, they'll be twisted. And actually, there's nothing wrong with that. This technique comes from the Middle East, and a lot of knitters there do knit through the front loop and twist it, and that tightens up that first row of knitting in your sock toe. So it's perfectly okay to do that. I'm just going to do it through the back loop so you can see how to do that if you want to, and that makes it look like a regular row of stockinette stitch, and it's not any different from the rest of the sock. But that's something that is basically what I like to call knitter's choice. You can decide how you want to do it. So again, I'm going to push that up to the tip because it's a little difficult to get in between, and I'm going to go across. And can you see how I'm going into the back loop? I know it's difficult to see because there's so many needles here and so few stitches and everything's close together. but I'm going into the back of each stitch. Once I get done with this row, the hard part of this is over. Seriously, yes, you can believe me. This is the hardest part of this sock toe. It's not difficult at all once you get all the stitches on the needle. It looks so cool. But now you can see I've got the stitches on the needle, and really I'm done with the hard part of the sock. So